Today, welcome back to another Wednesday TCM stream. I will be your host today. How's everyone doing today? How's everyone feeling? Hopefully better than me. I don't know if you can hear it, but I've been pretty sick since Friday, so I'm getting better though, getting over it. Looks like we have quite a few people in the chat. I started to do longer countdowns just so we can get more people in by the time the stream actually starts. Let's see, what do we have here? Zen Carter, welcome back. Another familiar face. Welcome to the stream. We have Glaciality. Welcome. Quite a few folks that have come to other streams before. Always nice to see repeat viewers. What is this about? We're going to be doing some memory forensics today. So we'll probably get into that shortly. Brit was abducted by aliens. Yep. That checks out. Hello, TCM. Hello to you, my friend. Welcome to the stream. Hello. Packet Watchdog, welcome. Mr. Edmonds, welcome to the stream. Oh no, you got sick too. Yep. I know how it feels. This weird intro music. Yeah, I should probably get some better tunes for the intros. But that was just one of the defaults. I like Tyler Ramsby's streams. He usually has some rap music playing during his intros. Which tool are we going to use today? Yes, good question. We're going to use Volatility, one of my favorite memory forensic tools. I think we've done a few other boxes in the past in previous live streams, but this one in particular, I guess I'll just introduce what we're going to be doing today. This actually comes from the Practical Windows Forensics course over at Blue Cape. A nice friend of TCM, Marcus Schober, who used to have the PWF course on the TCM Academy, but you can now find it on Blue Cape Security. He was kind enough to give me access to the course because there's some interesting labs that you can take in the course, and I thought doing a memory forensics one would be nice to showcase on a stream. So I'll never say no to I'll never say no to a memory image to dissect. It's always fun, usually a good time. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I think it'll be a nice little walkthrough. So we'll get into that momentarily while I catch up on the questions here. It's a little bit distracting. How do I do this? There we go. Yes, today is forensics. Like every other Wednesday I'm on here, it seems. Yeah, I never liked that EDM music that Alex always played. Just so loud. Especially for you, where it's probably like the morning, right? At least here it's like noon, so it's a good wake up, but no, I couldn't stand that song. Just finished your 2 courses, a great experience. Thanks a lot. Oh, that's awesome to hear. I'm glad you enjoyed them. I assume, hopefully, you're talking about the security operations courses. If you're talking about other TCM courses, I'm sure they were fantastic as well. But no, that's awesome to hear. Blue team, yes, yeah. That's what we're doing. Ooh, that's a good, a slight introduction on autopsy one day. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think maybe the next time I'll stream, I'll try to find a Sherlock that's like a deeper like investigation where we get a memory image, and we could use autopsy for that. I'll write that down so I don't forget. I'll try to do that next stream. We got Digital Andrew in the chat. Welcome. We're actually going to be streaming. Yeah, I guess I can say we're going to be streaming next week as well. Digital Andrew and I, Mr. Bellini. So stay tuned for next Wednesday as well. I'm looking forward to that. We have some fun stuff in the pipeline that we'll be able to talk about next week. Almost finishing the PSAP. Nice. Congrats. Hope you enjoyed it. If you take the exam, best of luck on it. I'm sure you will find much success if you've enjoyed the course. When can we expect a new TCM forensics course? I don't have a date, sorry. But what we're going to be doing is I really want to go into sort of deep dive forensics on a bunch of different topics. So we won't be able to release that as like one main release. So what we're going to do is probably similar to how we did or how Alex did the expert level web course, where it was sort of like a drip release where you would sort of have these standalone smaller courses as individual modules. So I think we're going to go that way and sort of modularize it because I don't think it can fit into one sort of monolithic course like the SOC courses. I think what I really want to do is focus on an individual area of forensics. For example, registry forensics, that could be an entire 5 to 10 hours on its own. And so that'll probably be considered its own course, but sort of in an overarching sort of Windows forensics pathway, I think is the goal. And so we'll be doing that as sort of a drip release throughout the year. And I think we're aiming for the end of March for at least our first kind of drip, which will be a new kind of way that we can deliver more frequent courses and more frequent labs and training, which I think will be super cool. Yeah, if you didn't catch Bellini's latest video last Friday, was it last Friday? Yeah, last Friday. I thought that was super cool. He shows off kind of, I guess you'd call it a vulnerability in pretty much any cheap kind of IoT camera. And actually demonstrates how you could sort of patch in your own malicious code into the sort of the chip there. So it's a super cool video. Very nicely demonstrated. And unlike me, he was able to condense it so it's not like a 45-minute video. So I need to take some tips from him. Oh, Glaciale, that's awesome. You started your SOC 201. I hope you enjoy the class. That's super exciting, and best of luck on the PSAP. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Speaking of which, just in general, for anyone interested, we do have a live training coming up near the end of March. It's going to be March 23rd to 25th. One of our instructors is going to be doing the SOC Level 2 live class. So if you are interested, I'm sure Britt will drop a link at some point throughout the chat to get more details on some of our live training offerings. Yes, Matt Brown does awesome videos on IoT. He's collaborated with Mr. Bellini as well, so another great friend of the channel. So definitely check out Matt Brown. All right, let us open up our screen share again, just because I know at some point I'm going to lose my ability to talk because that's how it's been since Friday. With whatever cold I have going on. I thought it was strep throat, but apparently not, something viral. So let's just sort of introduce what we're going to be doing here today. Again, this comes from the Practical Windows Forensics course over on Blue Cape, which was recently retired from the Academy, sadly, but if you do want to take the course, again, it's offered on Blue Cape. Marcus is a great instructor. He's put together some awesome labs, which specifically the memory forensics one kind of section of the course kind of caught my eye. And I thought, there's a nice little memory image that we could take a look at least introduce volatility, maybe take a look at some different plugins that we could use, sort of my general process when it comes to memory forensics. So we'll keep it relatively simple today, as much as we can, doing memory forensics. But I think overall, it'll be a nice sort of introduction. And I don't want to showcase too much of the course or anything. They do have individual labs too over at Blue Cape, so maybe future streams will be able to do some of those. Marcus was super grateful and gave me access. So, so with this, essentially the course has you creating your own artifacts. You essentially run an attack script, which implements a ton of different host-based artifacts on your system, and then you go ahead and triage and sort of acquire the memory, the disk image, the triage image, and so you get to work with all those artifacts that you just created throughout the course, which I thought was a really cool way of going through it. And one of the artifacts is the memory capture, right? That's one of the first things you typically want to do when you come across a computer of interest, right? Whether it be in a compromised scenario or, something like a traditional, legal or criminal sort of case, like a insider threat, whatever it is. Typically, you don't want to lose your volatile evidence, right? So that's typically the first thing you do is acquire memory before you do anything else, right? You don't pull the plug. You need to get your hands on memory because oftentimes, if you don't, there's so much on systems that you lose, and you, unless you get lucky with something like a page file or a hybrid file or volume shadow copies, but typically if we're thinking about memory, page file or hibernation files are pretty much your only other option if you don't capture memory. And there's certain things in memory that a disk image is never going to have, right? Active processes, active network connections, a ton of information that you can only get through memory analysis and acquisition. And so what we have here is, where is it? We have our Windows 10 memory capture.raw file. We also have the hash, which is always a good idea to make sure we have that integrity. But if I were to run, a hashing algorithm over this file, it's pretty large, right? So it'll probably take a long time to get those results. But with that, we can start to dig in to this memory file, which was provided for us in the VM. And so we can go through sort of the general process of figuring out metadata about the memory capture, making sure we're working with the right capture. We can start listing out processes, network connections. We can dig into the registry if we want to. We can start dumping out files. We can look at, all the different web browser activity going on in a memory file, right? There's so much we could do, and there's so many questions that can only be answered by looking at a memory capture. So that's sort of the general introduction as to why we're doing this here, right? And sadly, it's a little bit difficult, right? Which is why we kind of need to have specialized tools like Volatility or memproc FS is a really cool one because when we think about like disk-based evidence, right? We sort of have a nice hierarchy, right? We have folders, we have files. If we're taking a triage image, right, we can pick out specific files like the master file table that we want to look at, specific artifacts. We don't really have that luxury when we're working with memory, right? It's just sort of the way the memory structures and the data, the way it's presented. It's not really how memory works, right? So we need things like Volatility that can parse through a memory capture and give us options through plugins to actually extract the information that we need. There is a tool that I mentioned called memproc FS. I'm not sure if it's included in this course VM or if it's covered. It might be, but it's another fantastic memory tool that sort of aims to do that, taking the memory structures out of the memory and sort of putting it into a directory-like structure, which is super cool, like visually. That makes our analysis feel a lot more at home. But in this case, I want to use Volatility. Again, it's sort of the most common tool out there, sort of open source, very common for this kind of thing. And so what I typically like to do, with any time I go into memory analysis is, a standard kind of, not checklist, but like a standard thing that I typically like to check. I like to list out the processes, right? Look at network connections. Maybe we're tying processes over to network connections. Maybe we're looking for specific indicators in the form of like IP addresses or port numbers, different connections and their associated processes. Right on the process side, we can get the process IDs, which we can then use to sort of correlate. We can actually pull out images, or we can dump out processes if we want to. We can look at the parent-child relationships. We can look at things like the command line invocations of those processes. And so there's a ton that we can dig into. Again, I mentioned it earlier, we can look at registry hives and different keys that we can dump out, or we can dump out individual files as well. And so Volatility gives us a ton of plugins to do exactly that. And so I have Volatility already installed on this VM. So if I just call Vol with the help option there, it's going to list out basically everything we might want to do specifically on our Windows capture here. So the way it works is, again, Volatility is multi-platform, and so we can run different Mac-related plugins, different Linux-related plugins, for example, PS List here, or we have a ton of different Windows plugins that we can run. And so this is sort of the syntax. We need to call the operating system that we're targeting, and then we usually have this different directory structure of plugins, right? So we have under privileges here, we have the privs plugin, or we have things like PS tree, right? Or PS scan, PS list, very common when we're dealing with processes. And so first thing I usually like to run just to sort of get my bearings is windows.info, or, depending on what you're working with, linux.info, mac.info, basically to kind of enumerate or pull back metadata about our capture itself, right? In Volatility 2, this is Volatility 3, fortunately the latest and greatest. But back in 2, we had to use the image info plugin. And it was really important to do so because we had to extract things like the operating system version, the profile, in order for us to figure out what platform we need to target with our plugins. But this has sort of been a different approach in Volatility 3. And so what I can do here is run the F argument here to provide our image, right? The file. So that's going to be win10 memory.raw. And I'm just going to call windows.info. And this is going to parse, as we can see here, what are called symbol tables. We can see this is sort of a local symbol table that has been downloaded on this VM. And the idea is that this is kind of the map that tells us where, or tells Volatility where the different kernel and memory structures are, right? And how everything is sort of laid out in memory. Because each version of the operating system is going to have its own kind of layout, essentially, right? So Volatility needs to know, where do I go, right? How do I format this memory image to find and pull out what you need, right? Where are the things like the e-process structures, or what offsets do I need to know about? And again, this kind of used to be a pain in Volatility 2 because we had to figure out the platform and provide that with every command. But Volatility 3 is fortunately a little bit smarter, and we can feed it in those symbol tables. Again, either locally, or if we had internet access, it can go out and actually fetch those from the repository. So very cool. But again, very simple here. All we get are things like the, for example, the major and minor version of the operating system, right? So we could just Google this. I don't think this VM has internet access, but we could Google that sort of this number here and say, what Windows version is this? And it'll tell us sort of the major and minor version, sort of break it down. We can see the system root, right? So where is the Windows directory located? We can see the system time of when this capture was taken. The product version, so we can see Windows 10, right? So a ton of different, nice to sort of get our bearings here before we start digging into things like processes. And so actually, it's usually a good idea just to save this over to a file, right? So I'll just call this info.txt, just so I can reference it and not have to run Volatility each time. And so now if I run cat info, there we go. We have our information nice and saved here for us. Yeah, that's a lot of options in Volatility. A lot of plugins. Let me pull up the chat here. I have 3 monitors, but apparently it's not enough for me to to multitask well enough. Yeah, how to install Ubuntu Safe. If you take most of our courses, there's usually a guide on installing Ubuntu, but you're on YouTube, right? So put that into the search bar on YouTube and you'll find a ton of videos on how to do that. Fortunately, it's not too complex, depending on what hypervisor you're using. All right, so we sort of haven't done much analysis yet, right? We've just sort of listed out, I would say, just metadata about our capture. So let's start digging into probably the most exciting artifact in a memory capture, which are the processes, right? And there's generally two different ways to enumerate things like processes or network connections, different things in volatility. There's generally two approaches. So we have sort of the list approach and also the scan approach. And so, for example, if I were to run this again, instead of Windows info, I could run ps list to sort of, as the name suggests, list out the processes, just like running a ps command on a live system, for example, right? Or a task list or get-process in PowerShell. And what that's going to do is sort of walk through the active process list in the capture and sort of show us what the running processes were at the time of capture, right? But we also have ps scan, which I don't think I'm going to run because I think it's going to take a lot longer. Sometimes Volatility just really likes to take its time, especially during some of the scan plugins. But it's sort of going to take a different approach and scan for different eProcess objects or structures in the memory, and it can try to find processes that have been unlinked, right, or terminated, or more or less hidden from when we just run a ps scan, right? And so it can be a more verbose way of listing out processes or older processes. A lot of time we think about memory and RAM, right? We think about what is currently happening, an active snapshot, but we can actually get some historical information in RAM as well, with a lot of caveats, right? We can do that by looking at unlinked or terminated processes as well, using something like ps scan. But anyways, I'm just going to run ps list here to just sort of, again, look at that VAD tree and sort of list out what is sort of noted as actively running. All right. What I should do also is save that out to a file, just so I can start to maybe use grep and cut this up if I wanted to. But what we're really doing here, as we can see in the columns at the top, very similar to just running like a task list in Windows, right? So we're getting things like the process ID, the parent process ID, right? So we can start to make sense of some of these parent-child relationships, right? So we can see what is spawning which. There's an easier way to do that, which we'll get to in a second. We can see the image file name, right? So the binary. We can see things like the offset in memory, right? So what is the location of where this was found? We can see things like the threads, the handles, the session ID. You see this Windows on Windows 64 here telling us if it's a 64-bit process or a 32-bit process. Creation time, exit time, right? So we can get even some timestamp information as well. So we get a ton of information just from running ps list. But obviously, we're just seeing a list of processes here, right? So unless we see something named like malware.exe, right? Or something very obvious, if we see references maybe to PowerShell being spawned from WinWord, right? So if we're looking for those sort of behavioral anomalies, right? We can see Sysmon was running at the time of capture. Here's PowerShell, right? So we can see it was spawned by 5684. And I'm sure if we look through this or do a grep, we can figure out what spawned PowerShell. We can see atomic service. That's interesting. Actually, I think this is part of that install script that you go through in the course, right? So you're running atomic red team, right? So this is one of the binaries that get executed. We can see Notepad was running and a bunch of like service host processes. And so that's one way to do it, right? We can start to go down the list. Again, we can save that out to a file. I'll just call that pslist.txt, just so we get a copy of that. And we can start to grep out for whatever we want, right? So if I grep out ps list, we found that PowerShell was spawned by 5684. And so what I can do is grep 5684 against that. And we can see explorer.exe was the parent there, right? So grep nicely highlights that for us. So we can see it spawned security health, that sort of system tray. We can see the VirtualBox tray, OneDrive, but it also spawned PowerShell. right? So this is the process ID of PowerShell. So I can also maybe search for that to see if it spawned anything, right? So kind of walking through this manually, we can see container host was spawned, which is quite common if you spawn something like CMD or PowerShell. But again, I keep saying there's an easier way to do this, of course, and that's by using PS tree. So if you've sort of done, live response on a Linux operating system, for example, you might be familiar with PS tree. It's sort of the exact same concept here, just doing so through Volatility. Interestingly, on a Windows memory image, right? So what I'll do is just change our plugin here to PS tree, save that out to pstree.txt. Just give this one a moment. Usually it takes a bit longer because we're going to see it includes a lot more interesting fields for us to take a look at. There we go. Is this ethical hacking? No, it's kind of the opposite. Maybe not. That would be unethical hacking. What I mean is this is sort of the defense side of things. So we're doing ethical forensics, I guess you could say. Maybe the system was ethically hacked and now we're ethically analyzing it. The number of monitors you need is always n+1. That's the truest thing I've seen this week. All right. So I'm going to type out our PS tree output here. And it's going to be a little bit hard to follow, especially in the command line, unfortunately. What I might be able to do more commonly is open this up in Notepad or whatever sort of text editor we have on the system. So let me see. Should be under cases here. Whoops. Yeah, we're in the mount directory. So where's that going to be? Cases. There we go. So we have pstree.text. There we go. So we can open it up in, I believe there's VS Code on here. Just to make it a little bit easier to read. So let that open up. Want to hack NASA and Facebook? You are not on the right channel for that, unfortunately. All right, we'll just give this a second to go here. But as that loads, I can sort of maybe try to explain what we're looking at here, even though, again, it is kind of a mess in the command line, especially zoomed in like this. But you can see we have these long lines here, and some of them have these different asterisks here. So this is telling us sort of the hierarchy or sort of the relationship between processes. And so we can see this one has 2 here, there's 2 little stars. Search indexer, and we can see this one under here has 3, indicating that sort of the relationship of what was being spawned by which, right? And so again, it is kind of hard when we're just scrolling through like this. But for example, here's a good example. We can see the system process of 4, right, is spawning these different system processes, right? And so a lot of this is just normal system activity. Typically, we want to look at focus our analysis early on in sort of the user land side, usually near the bottom where we get these higher process IDs. But that's just sort of a general low-hanging fruit kind of thing. There we go. That looks a little bit better because it's not sort of being word wrapped. So let me try to zoom in. And so let's try to find that PowerShell example again, just to sort of graphically showcase it a little bit better. There we go. Whoops, zoomed out. And so we can see explore.exe. And as we scroll through, we get a lot more information, right? So we can even see the sort of volume that it's sort of found on, and also the location, the full path to the binary that was executing the process, right? So we can see Windows explore.exe, right? It looks good, looks normal here. As we go down, we can see we have sort of 2 here because it was spawned by user init. And then we have, again, VBox tray, OneDrive. It looks like we have PowerShell here, right? So the PowerShell process was spawned from, again, the common location of PowerShell. What else do we have here? So we have Notepad down at the bottom. And why is it at the bottom? It looks like it's kind of an orphan process, right? It has a parent ID, parent process ID, but I don't think this is going to be found in the file, right? So it's just listed here, but it's not actually existing, right? So whatever spawned notepad.exe has since exited or just didn't exist, right? So it doesn't have that asterisk that we would expect, indicating that it was spawned, from something in the list, which is interesting. So it's kind of an orphan process, you could call it, right? So I kind of want to know how this spawned now, right? Because typically it would be spawned, if it's Notepad, it would be going through Explorer, right? Or maybe the command line, right? So you can open up Notepad from PowerShell if you wanted to, for example. But just seeing it on its own is a little bit interesting to me. What we can do is look at where it was spawned from. It looks like it is, in fact, the legitimate Notepad binary, right? Or at least it's executing from the legitimate location. But there's a ton more that we can look into in processes to sort of corroborate that fact, right? What was the other one? Oh, that atomic service we can look at too. Let me try to find that. There we go. We can see it was spawned from 624. And we can see a bunch of these service hosts here also spawned by 624. So I'm assuming 624 here is going to be services.exe. Let me try to find that. That's probably going to be way up here. Yep. There we go. So services.exe. We just see a ton of different service host processes, right? These sort of service container on Windows systems that sort of execute and manage services on the system. And typically services, there are a lot of different services running on a system, right? So that's why we see so many different service host processes. Another common kind of target for malware, right? If you can get a process running as service host or make it look like it's service host, right? You might not notice it as an analyst just because you're sort of inundated by so many different service host processes. But if we have the command line, which we do, we should see that they all should have the K argument here pointing to a service group, right? So again, that's one of those low-hanging indicators that would indicate that, hey, maybe this is not a legitimate service host process. I think we've done a different box in the past where that was sort of the finding, right? There was a masquerading service host process that didn't have the K argument, which was a nice giveaway that we want to dig into it farther. All right, so again, I am a little bit suspicious on the Notepad process. It is executing from the right place, but as we can see here, how do we know that the binary hasn't been replaced or maybe injected into, right? So that's what we're going to continue looking at as we sort of have now narrowed our focus on this Notepad process. All right. So let me clear this out. What we can do now, for example, we can also look at, actually, let's just grab the command lines of those processes, right? So this is another way that we could quickly sort of enumerate that. And then we'll look at sort of the modules to see if anything has been injected into that process. And so instead of PS3, we can run something like windows.command line. Now, if we run the help page here, we should be able to narrow it down to specific PIDs or process IDs, right? And so the ones we're interested in, again, I'm picking on that PowerShell process, also the atomic service process. So let me grab 6988. We also want Notepad, so 6552, and then 6572. Oops. So we can just put those in sequential order there. So it'll grab the command lines from all three of those. So 6988, 6572. and then 6552. All right, and again, we can just see the full command lines now of where those were executing from. And so again, that's another way that we could see, for example, it looks like this PowerShell process was part of that atomic red team, sort of atomic, right? That simulation that was being run. Specifically the atomic service here, we can see where that service binary is running from. Looks like it's found under T1543, right? So we can even see a MITRE ID here. Again, this is sort of a simulation kind of action here to create the artifacts. And so we can see the specific atomic that was run. And again, we can see Notepad here. All right, so let's dump out that that process there, right? That Notepad process. And so what we could do is run Volatility again. And instead of Windows command line, we could run, oh, it looks like we have Mr. Blue Cape himself here. Welcome to the stream. Yeah, we're having some fun going through this Windows 10 memory image here. I'm a little bit suspicious of this Notepad process, and so we're going to keep digging into it. All right. And so again, we could dump out the process itself right out of memory, which is super cool. And then we can use whatever kind of disk analysis capabilities we have, right? So that's one way we can sort of reach into our memory capture and pull out things that we need. And so to do that, and we just sort of need to highlight the process ID that we want. And so we can provide the PID there, and we can also provide the dump option as well. And so again, this 6552, we can target that. And then I can provide dump here. All right, and there we go. And this is going to pull out, again, we can see the file here that was saved. We're going to see the process ID. We're going to see the name of the process, the memory offset, and also it's going to save that as a .dmp file. If I were to run file against this file that we pulled out, we can see it's a PE or a portable 32 executable, right? And so we can start to make some sense of the file headers there. You know, if we really wanted to, we could start running things like strings against the file and start to do some static analysis. We're not going to get into all this, right? We could grab the hash value of the file as it was executing in memory, right? So we can run SHA-256 sum against the hash there. And that could be another indicator that we can look at. It's a little bit, we have to be a bit careful with pulling hashes out of actively running processes in memory because as sort of the different modules kind of open up as the process is executing, that can change the hash. So we don't always have the exact same static hash as we would as the binary of the file on disk, right? But again, what I would typically do is send this over to a reverse engineer, right? Someone much smarter than me to dig into this file. Another thing, as we're sort of thinking about how this is an orphan process, and it's a little bit suspicious here. It is running from the right directory, but maybe we're suspicious that maybe some of the code was injected, right? Or maybe a module was injected. We have a ton of different options and volatility to look at that, right? I think someone mentioned, let me try to find it. Someone mentioned process hollowing, right? Process injection. Volatility has a ton of great plugins that we can use to really start to surface that information to us and take away a lot of the manual pain of looking at, you know, some really low-level indicators, right? And so malfind is a good example. What we're going to run here is DLL list, for example, to pull out the listing of the DLL modules loaded into the process, right? So that can be a nice high-level way to list out what modules are running with the process. And so, for example, what we could do is run windows.dll list. If I just run the help option here, we can see it's going to list out the loaded DLLs in a particular Windows memory image, and we can provide it a specific process ID, right? And so we can even dump them out, right? Which we'll do if we find something interesting. And so, again, I'm going to call the same process ID here of 6552. Actually, what I should do, I should have saved that out to a file. But anyways, we can sort of make sense of this. Actually, no, I'm going to rerun that. Cool. Then let me open this up. All right. All right, so now we have a list of all those loaded DLLs for that Notepad process, right? We can see the sort of location, right? The path of where they were loaded from. And so we see a lot of, for the most part, expected kind of runtime modules, right? We have NTDLL, kernel 32, right? Kernel base, a ton of standard processes here. But let me try to zoom out a little bit. I know there's just a ton of text on screen, which is not always fun for people to watch on stream. But near the bottom here, we can see a suspicious looking DLL, right? Obviously, we're running an atomic simulation here, so the indicators are going to be very obvious, right? We can see the exact MITRE ID here. I'm pretty sure this is DLL injection as a technique. Let me just look this up. Yeah, process injection, right? So that's exactly what's sort of being created here. And we can see the path of where it was executing from, right? And so we saw this directory earlier when we were looking at that atomic service process. And so again, operating from sort of the same location, and we can see the exact DLL that was loaded. And so what we can do, why is it suspicious? Because this is not a standard DLL that notepad.exe is gonna import, right? We can see, like, again, the standard kind of Windows system kind of DLLs at the top here. We can see different libraries that Notepad or a tool like Notepad would want to import, right? We can see text input framework. We can look this up and see what exactly it does. But again, if we see something that's being pulled in from a non-system 32 location, right? In this case, it's coming from this atomic red team folder, which again is super obvious in this context, because if you know what atomic red team is, you know it's sort of an attack simulation framework, right? But if we see something from maybe a temp location or just a suspicious location, yeah, someone said, if you spot the MITRE tags, it's very obvious in this case, right? But again, it's just not something that would normally be executing from or normally be loaded into notepad.exe, right? If we wanted to do more of like a baseline comparison, we could open up a clean sort of sandbox machine, right? A Windows system, open up Notepad and grab the same artifacts, right? We could look at the DLL list from a known clean Notepad process and just compare the results, right? And we would eventually find that, hey, there's been an additional DLL loaded into this suspicious one. And so now we've sort of found that, we can also dump out the DLL from memory too, right? So again, Volatility is a lifesaver here. Really makes our lives easier. I think we can just run the dump option here, as well as the name, right? So we want to do grab specifically. We can specify some regex here to match a DLL name, right? So we can just use that. What's it called? Yeah, we can just use that MITRE ID here to limit our result, right? Just so we pull out the one. And so make sure we have the process ID, the name here. I'm just going to call T1055.dll. Wait, no, I think it's .001.dll. Yeah. Just copy and paste that. And then just the dump option there. Are you using CMD on Kali Linux? No, this is not Kali Linux. This is a Windows Analyst machine, which again is part of the Practical Windows Forensics course. So you get sort of this nice browser-based VM, which is a Windows VM, but it has the Windows subsystem for Linux installed, right? And so I have an Ubuntu prompt here that's running on Windows, but through WSL. Yeah, there you go. So that's WSL under Windows. It's a lot easier to run Volatility on a Linux system, I find. So what do we? Yeah, so we got that dump file there. You can see, similar to the process, it's going to give us the PID, the name of the DLL, and sort of the offset there as a dump file. And so again, just like with the file itself, I can run, whoops, let me extend my time here. That would be helpful. I can run file on that. We can see, again, it's a DLL file, right? That's being loaded in. We can see, for example, again, we could run strings on it, but we're not gonna get into static malware analysis or reverse engineering on this stream. I would just send this to someone much smarter than me to look into this, right? But again, even just running something like strings, we might be able to pull out some interesting information here, right? We can see a reference to a repository here, and we see a .pdb file. But again, this is just pulling out user-readable kind of comments or strings or variable names that are found in the compiled DLL, right? So again, not always a silver bullet on its own, but it might be able to give us some slight indicators, but we can see a bunch of gibberish here, right, in this case. But again, we could also run like a hashing algorithm, right? So MD5 sum against that same file. And again, same kind of caution as before. We have to be careful about hashes that we're pulling out of memory, just because, again, they can be very volatile, right? We might not always get a one-to-one as the file on disk, but I have to do that. Let me copy this. I have to do this on a separate screen, just so I can run VirusTotal here, and then I'll paste the results into here. There we go. And so if I do look up that hash on VirusTotal, make sure that is sharing. There we go. We do get some hits, interestingly enough. So this DLL, this specific one, must have been uploaded at some point, because we do get the different hashes, and we can see that at least 2 vendors flagged it as malicious. But again, if we were to see everything as undetected here, that wouldn't be too far out of the norm, even if this were a really malicious file. Because again, we can't always trust the static hashes that we're getting out of memory. But that is interesting that it was caught at least by 2 vendors. All right. And so we did find some evidence here of DLL injection, right? We found the Notepad process, which was running as an orphan process, interestingly. And when we zoomed into that and started to pull out or list out the DLLs, we did find a suspicious one here, which, again, in this case, fortunately, whoops, that's my timer to remind myself, but the platform did it for me. There you go. So, yeah, again, in this case, fortunately, it's not actually malicious. This is just an atomic red team simulation, but it is legitimate, actual DLL injection going on here, which is interesting. So I did want to end off talking about Registry as well, because there's another example that you can go through in the course, which I think is a really good example of looking at Registry in memory captures as well. And I think someone mentioned fileless malware before. This is a good sort of example of that we can find too. And so, amazingly, with Volatility, we can also interrogate the registry and different registry hives and values and keys, because the registry is kind of always loaded into active memory when the system's running, right? So those registry hives, right, those hive files on disk kind of open up on a live system into what we commonly see on a live system as like HKLM or HKey local machine, HKey current user, and etc., right? And so we can use the print key plugin here. So let me go back and back this out. We can run windows.printkey. Actually, I think it's windows.registry. Sometimes you have to go 2 layers deep to find your plugin. Otherwise, it'll yell at you. Yeah, there you go. So that's what that MITRE ID is referring to, right? And so in a real investigation, you're not gonna see malware named as MITRE IDs, right? But if you're running an attack simulation script or framework like Atomic Red Team, that's why they do this. Is so if you're hunting for this, sort of you found the needle in the haystack, right? You understand what technique is being simulated here, and what mitigations and detections you can do from the defensive side, right? And so super cool, actually. Is there a big difference between Volatility 2 and 3 in terms of commands? There actually kind of is. Fortunately, most of the bread and butter kind of things, your PS lists, right? You're listing out processes, network connections, registry stuff. A lot of that carried over. I would say the most common kind of plugins, but there were some really rare kind of super useful plugins on Volatility 2 that just haven't been ported over, just because it can be a little bit of an effort, just because the way it's been re-architected. You can't just sort of one-to-one copy over a plugin. You sort of have to rewrite it for Volatility 3. And even though it's been out for a little bit now, not every plugin has been moved over. But again, there are also new plugins that have been written for Volatility 3 that you can't find on 2. And so what I've actually found, even currently recently, is running both versions on the same sort of analyst machine, just for those cases where you really need to run something from 2 that you can't run in 3, or vice versa. And so, but yeah, it is an open source project, right? So if you find something that you really want moved over, and if you understand the tool and what it's doing, you could write your own plugin, right? So, or you can contribute and help move things over and again, contribute to the project, which I think is super cool. Yes, we're going to do some of the real investigations from the labs here. I just figured this would be kind of a nice stream to sort of walk through some of the different plugins and introduce Volatility, and then we can start to dig in to some of the real labs in Blue Cape's labs, because they do have some super cool scenarios that you can do, right? This is just sort of walking through in my own way some of what's shown in the course, with some of the course artifacts, but there's also a whole section where you have labs, like individual scenarios. So I think that's what we'll do. But just to end it off on registry, again, we can print out keys here, and so we can also list out the hives too, right? So we can run hive list to actually list out, hey, what registry hives can we start to dig into or interrogate on the system, and specifically. One that we could look at here, and I'm just jumping a little bit ahead just to make sure the stream doesn't go too long, but I'm going to look for the user class.dat file for, in this case, your user that you sort of set up all the artifacts for is called IE user. And so this is one that we can pull out here, the user class.dat file specifically for this user. Someone said, does Volatility have a module for netstat? Yes, it does. And so you can, just like with PS list and PS scan, you have netstat is the name of the module. You also have net scan as well, to really sort of, if you want to be more verbose and maybe look at previously terminated or inactive connections as well. And so just like with processes, you can also do the same with network connections. All right. And so we're going to target this user class.dat file because, again, someone mentioned fileless malware before. There's a good example in this registry hive that we can look at. We can try to do it in 2 different ways. We'll do it in memory, and we can also look at Registry Explorer really quickly, because I think there's also a really cool way that we could find it quicker with Registry Explorer. But again, that would assume we have access to the registry hive in our triage collection, which fortunately we do. And so what we can do is look at the offset here for this specific hive, and then we can specifically print keys from, in this case, user class.dat. And so I'll just grab this here. What I'll do is run print key again. I'm going to provide let me just run help here to see the options. I'm going to provide offset here of the hive itself. And so I'll just paste that in. And the key that we want to pull here is just called Atomic Red Team. Right. And I'm just doing this to showcase the value here as an example. Obviously, there would be no way for you to know this unless, again, go through the course. It's really, really fun course. So let's hope that this works here. Yeah, there we go. And so now we're pulling out the value of this key here, this atomic red team key, which is found in that user class.dathive. And we can see we have a key called art or atomic red team. And the value here looks very suspicious, right? I think a ton of you are going to recognize what we're looking at here. You might not know what it decodes to, but you can probably recognize the encoding method used, which is probably the most common form of, again, fileless malware in the registry. We're going to see these suspicious long base64 strings. It's kind of a very common, you could say, malware execution technique, often a persistence technique. And again, sometimes you'll see this referred to as fileless malware because it's generally going to be executed in a way where you don't have a malicious script saved or mapped to somewhere on disk, right? It's sort of encoded and hidden in the registry like this. It can then be sort of executed from memory in PowerShell, for example, or called in different ways. But again, I kind of have some qualms with that fileless malware term when it's used in this context, just because, again, the registry at the end of the day is still on disk, right? But anyways, it's still a very common technique that I think is a good demonstration in this example as well, right? Where we can find directly from a memory capture, which is super cool. So if I copy this here, if I open up CyberChef, I might be able to decode this. Make sure I grab that. There we go. Yes, is it Space 64? You are correct, right? And even if we didn't know, I mean, it is, once you've seen enough base 64, you can tell by the padding at the end, right? The equal sign and just the character set in use. I think if we run magic here, it'll tell us. Yeah, so it's telling us, this is probably base 64, right? And it'll even decode it for us. So if I drag over from base 64, we can see it is running some PowerShell, right? So this sort of encoded registry value here decodes to this, right? So fortunately, again, not actually malicious in this case. It's just giving us a little hello message here. But the way it could execute is kind of in that fileless, kind of in-memory kind of way, right? You could run IEX and point it over to this value here, right? And it'll execute. And so super cool. The other reason I want to show this is because I think this is going to work. We can also look at a hunting technique for this exact kind of thing. And to do that, we're going to step out of memory for a second and we can look at the registry itself. And so the tool of choice, in my opinion, is going to always be Registry Explorer, which should be on this system. Let me go into full screen. I might have to dig for it. Oh, it's going to be here, yeah, under Easy Tools. Let's go to Registry Explorer and just open this up quickly. Oh, I'm pretty sure this is going to work. There's a nice little find capability in Registry Explorer that Eric Zimmerman has put in, which really makes finding these fileless malware kind of techniques quite trivial, if you can believe it or not. So let me just wait for this to load for a second, see if we have any questions in the chat. Yeah, can't really let go of Volatility 2. Yeah, at least not yet. Hey, yeah, I'm glad you could catch the stream as well. Like I said, we're going to be streaming next Wednesday too, Mr. Bellini and myself. So be sure to stick around next week if you want to chat some more. All right, so we have Registry Explorer open up here, right? And so if we didn't know what to search for, again, there are some common, persistence keys in the registry, like the run keys, the run once keys, that we usually can pretty quickly navigate through. Also, which can be found in the local machine or in the current user. Again, there's some of the low-hanging fruit there. But what if we really wanted to hunt for those suspicious base 64 strings like that anywhere in a registry, right? And so what we can do here is open up the user class.dathive for that IE user, which we should be able to find in the triage collection, which is going to be under here, I'm pretty sure. Yep. And so again, if you go through the course, you're actually going to go through the acquisition process, right? That triage acquisition. And you're going to pull out, those different registry hives, which we really want to dig into when we're doing registry forensics, right? And so if I go under users here, we can always find the user class.dat file under the user's app data, specifically under local, and then Microsoft, and then Windows. And we see here we have user class.dat. We'll open that up there in Registry Explorer. And then assuming this works, this is going to be very quick, right? So I'm going to go under tools here to find. And it's a little bit, just the way the tool is, it's a little bit zoomed out. So hopefully you can see here. But this is an extremely useful way to hunt for strings anywhere in the registry, right? We can use regex, we can hunt for the key names, value data, the value names, even value slack. So a ton of different ways to pull back information. We can even set up timestamps for the last write times of those keys themselves. But we also have this little trick here called base 64 in values. And all we need to do here is just click on search. And it's going to look at, based on the default length here of 50 characters, it's going to pull back any instances of there being a base 64 string of 50 characters or more. And you can see when we ran that, we immediately found what we were looking for, right? So if I double click on that, it takes us right to this location under Atomic Red Team. We can see the art value here and the data of that value, which is that base 64 string. If we go data interpreter here, we can even sort of decode that from base 64. Again, I know this is super tiny, but that's a way we sort of could have hunted for that very quickly, as you can see. And so super cool. I think that was a nice kind of look at doing some memory forensics, even a little bit of registry forensics as well. And all in all, I did not do the course justice. So definitely, if you're going through the PWF course on Blue Cape, there's a whole memory forensics section, which you're going to go through similar artifacts and look at the memory image and really start to dig through all the different things you can find after an attack has occurred. And so, again, I really want to thank Marcus for giving me access to the course. It's super cool. And also the labs too, which we can hopefully do on some future streams. So it was a lot of fun. Let me return to the chat and we can wind down the stream for today. Alrighty. Let me look at some of the pin questions here and get caught up. Cool. Yeah. Thank you. I'm trying to think. I believe, yes, in the live, the SOC level 1 live training, we do have some volatility labs in there. But this lab from today was over on Blue Cape. So if you do want to see more of that, again, there are some labs you can check out there. Hack the Box has a few volatility labs that I know about. Try Hack Me probably does as well. I'm trying to think, like all the blue team kind of training lab places typically have at least one or two memory forensics investigations you can do. If you go back on the stream, I know we've done some before. If you just search for volatility or memory forensics on our live stream page, you should find some more examples of that as well. Yes, we could have dug into the network connections as well. That's something that we didn't do. But again, if we want to start to correlate processes with active network connections, that's a great way we could do it as well. All right. Oh, good question here. Does a PowerShell process count as suspicious? I mean, not really on its own. It always depends on the context, right? So, what user, uh, what user account, and that's another plugin we could have run is get user SIDs. Is we can see what user accounts and privileges are running certain processes. Um, so we can see if it's running as in an administrator context. We can see the user account that executed it. But again, if it's an accountant running PowerShell, that's a little bit, I'd be a little bit more suspicious than maybe an IT or a help desk user. But also we can look at the behavior as well, right? The context around it. What spawned this PowerShell process, right? Was it a Microsoft Word document that spawned PowerShell, right? Maybe through some kind of macro. That would be a lot more suspicious than, again, it is hard to say because it depends on the user as well as the context around it. You can also see what other processes PowerShell has spawned, right? Does it have any children? Yeah, so that was that fileless malware question. So hopefully you saw a good example of that where we had some base 64 in the registry, which was technically, at least from the definitions I've seen, is referred to as fileless malware. But again, you didn't see that in the PS tree output, right? We didn't see that in our processes because probably because it wasn't actively executing. But we did see the string itself was set to run PowerShell, right? So we would see PowerShell being run if it were executed, or whatever kind of process it was calling that script. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna go gonna go drink some honey and try to fix my voice before next Wednesday at least, so we can stream again. But thank you so much, everyone. Again, thank you to Blue Cape as well for providing the labs. That was super fun. We'll definitely do some more in the future. And so, hope you have a great rest of your week. And again, I will see you next Wednesday with Bellini and myself to talk about. Yeah, maybe I'll say we're going to do a fun CTF, and we're going to talk about what's up and coming for TCM. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.